I'll introduce you first off to Paul and Sylvana, who we've been working with for quite a while, and they've been really involved in Generate activities. So we've had them on the panel, they've run sessions for us, they've done a whole ton of mentoring, and this fits really neatly to the kind of the book they've written, because it is all about the wisdom that they possess, and a lot of us have the kind of entrepreneurial flair, which they obviously also have, but they have the experience, and they've learned from the kind of highs and lows of entrepreneurship what it really takes to kind of build a business. And so we thought there's no better couple to bring in than these guys. And I'll let them talk a little bit about the book. But the book just gives such great kind of real world insights into the reality of what it's like to actually do that business building. And so we just thought we'd take the opportunity to kind of glean as much information from them as we can. I think one of the problems, one of the challenges that we sometimes have is that students come to us with a great idea, lots of kind of confidence of youth, a little bit of capital as well, and just kind of go gung-ho. And actually understanding what it really does take to build a business is not as a way to put people off, but just to create a really kind of realistic expectation of what that life is like. And it really is a life rather than just a career. It takes up every part of your every part of your life. You kind of these guys will tell you, but it really is your baby, and each journey will be unique, and these guys will speak to that. But there are some kind of rules and suggestions and tips that these guys will be able to give that really speak to that vocation. So I'm going to hand over to these guys, and maybe Paul and Sylvana, it might be helpful kind of just basically giving us a bit of background and kind of what it was that motivated you in the first place to kind of look at this as a possible kind of life direction, and how you got into it, and maybe I'll ask you some questions once you've kind of given us a bit of an overview. And Navad, feel free to come in as well.
Okay, thank you.
Sure, absolutely. And I guess from the perspective of who we are, so some of you will know us, so those that are going to be watching later, some of you know us, and we've been doing a workshop, as LJ mentioned before, and Paul mentors a few. But just for those of you that don't know us, so Paul is the entrepreneur. Paul is the one whose story we're going to explore. My background is financial services. So I was an equities funds manager, a senior financial analyst. So I have that lens, and then more, well, I guess it's not so recent anymore, but I've been a leadership coach for a considerable period now. And to me, leadership and entrepreneurship go hand in hand. The sorts of things that we need to consider to build leaders and to help them to have a vision, to engage with others, to collaborate, to get what they want done, are many of the same sorts of considerations that entrepreneurs require. So the way we've written the book is Paul's narrative and then my overview at the end of each of Paul's, we call them slices. So the story is about Humble Pie, which was Paul's retail business. So why don't you speak about that?
Sure. I suppose by way of background, I worked for banks for quite a long time. And in the time that I did work for them, was across three countries. I had the opportunity of setting up businesses for them inside the umbrella, if you like, of the bank. And if you haven't come across the term yet, you will. You certainly will in our book, and you will more generally, is the term entrepreneur, which is essentially an entrepreneur but inside a corporation. So in my case, I was asked to set up a securitization business, which you may have heard of that term. And I was also asked to set up an asset management business in Asia, and one here, and a few other businesses over the years. But what that did is it gave me the hunger for setting up businesses. And once you create a business, the process of creating it, dealing with all the issues you have to deal with, makes you quite hungry to do the next thing, and then do the next thing, and then do the next thing. The biggest difference, which we can talk about during the course of this conversation, is if you're an entrepreneur, by and large, you're funded by the corporation that you're working for. So as an entrepreneur, in addition to actually doing whatever you're doing, making, in my case, pies and setting up that business, you also had to find the money to do it. And as an entrepreneur, I simply made a phone call and that was it, because the company was the one funding it. Outside of that, when you've got to raise money, it's hard, and it's not. It can be pretty soul destroying at times, but that's how it works. I mean, there's no other way of doing it, and it's everyone has to go through it, so it's part of the process. But that's almost a book in itself.
Yes.
Raising money for startups, you know.
Yeah.
Also, like you're talking about here, the kind of slightly further down the line when you are looking to kind of raise funds and stuff. And if you were, say, kind of someone like Nawad who is exploring this within her course as a potential kind of reality, how do you make, and this is a question that often comes up with our students, how do you make that leap from a real kind of deep sector kind of expertise in a certain problem that you're trying to solve to actually creating a business? How do you kind of make that jump? Where do you start? And who do you get in your corner? What kind of skills? What are the essential skills that you think are required to just basically make that leap?
You've just asked a huge question. And it's a really important question, but a huge question nonetheless. It's I think if I look back on my experience, and it's certainly part of what went through or comes through in the book, is you're trying to find some unique or different idea where you think there's a gap in the market that you're going to be better than, or better than somebody else that's out there, or offer something which is going to fill a gap. And or there's a need for it. There's a perception of need. Now, what typically you would do, and what you should do, is research and just check it out. See if there really is no one providing that, or they're not doing it the way you would like to do it. Or, but you're doing research on the market. Where is it? Where is the market? I can't emphasize that enough, that you have to do that research. You have to, even though you may love the idea, maybe no one else loves the idea. And I think falling in love with your idea is another chapter, but it's dangerous, because you then get blindsided. You don't think properly.
Can I answer?
Yeah, sure.
So I guess, as Paul's talking about it, when you think about a gap in the market, the gap could be that the product doesn't exist, or the service doesn't exist. Or it could actually exist, but there are subsegments, if you like. So you might be innovating on some sort of product or service that already exists. But if you think about it, in both cases, you're disrupting the market. And that's what entrepreneurs are. Entrepreneurs tend to be disruptors of the status quo. So you will get the new product, get the new service, because you're trying to find that gap where it's not being serviced properly now, or where you can provide an even better service. So just remember that you're a status breaker, if you like. You're the disruptor. That's the energy that drives the entrepreneur.
I think there's no magic formula to making the leap. There's a couple of stages in making a leap. One is to come up with an idea. One is to test the idea. So you're doing some research, but then you should start asking some people, what do they think? So it's not just you know, maybe you've missed the point or something. You've got to be a little careful with that. You'll have heard the expression focus groups, which a bandied around term, but it's a really important one. The great thing with focus groups is that they're independent. If you ask all your friends, what do they think? 99% of them will say it's great, because they don't want to be rude.
Yeah.
They like you, they don't want to upset you, because you're clearly passionate about this particular thing. But if you ask some people you don't know, it's kind of a strange thing to say, but people you don't know, what do they think? Then you're going to get probably a more frank answer. It may not be honest, but you'll get a frank answer. So then there's more balance. Now, in my case, I didn't ask independent people what they thought. I was completely committed to this thing. I thought it was a brilliant idea. And so I asked my friends, and they did what friends do, which is be supportive, not realizing, in fact, they were doing the opposite. They should have said to me, "Don't be crazy. What are you doing? What are you talking about?" instead they said, this is a great idea, go for it, you know. And I did, but I didn't do it entirely on that basis, but that was part of it.
And maybe, I guess, because those of you that are on the call tonight may not have actually read the book, so you don't really know what Humble Pie is about. So do you want to give the background to what Humble Pie was?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, that's probably a good idea. Humble Pie was my brilliant idea, which was, it's surprisingly, it's about pies. But where the idea came from originally, and then eventually the book, was in Australia, meat pies, savoury pies, are a national food. I forgot, you know, there's 25 million Australians in Australia, and there's like, I don't know, they eat like 1 billion pies a year. It's just some stupid number. But in the, you know, it can be 40-degree heat outside and people are eating hot pies. It's incredible. But they're very good. The Australian population demand pretty high quality, and you can get some terrific pies there. And I came across a shop that actually had won many awards for their pies, and that was kind of the inspiration for it. Partly too, because where the gap that I saw was pies in England, and in fact, I think they actually started in Wales, but pies here had missed all the culinary change that had happened over the 19th and 20th centuries. They were horrible. They were absolutely dreadful. And the only ones you could find that were really good were the odd butcher's shop in countryside England, where they made 6 pies a week and they were fantastic. But the regular ones you bought here were just dreadful. So I thought, look, this is a country that's invented the things but didn't do anything with them. What if I bought a premium pie with great innovative fillings? I was going to say people would eat them up. But people would eat them up. And that's kind of how it happened. So I did do research, a lot of research on the process of cooking, because I needed to know that as well, pretty obviously. And then research on what was out there, and that was fairly easy. You could get research. The big provider of research was Mintel. I couldn't afford to buy their research, but you could get bits and pieces from here and there. And there definitely was a demand for it, but definitely was considered a not great, poor food, cheap, nasty.
And if I can pitch in too, so one of the things that Paul did well, Paul was a sales guy, right? So at Bankers Trust, where we both met, Paul was a sales guy and was very affable, very good at engaging people in conversation. He found this store in New South Wales. He went up and just asked who the manager, because he observed, you were on holidays, weren't you? And he just noticed the traffic of people coming in and out of this store. It was a beach suburb. So there, you know, guys coming off their surfboards, people coming in with their suits, mums with their kids, this steady stream of people going into this store. So he just went up and asked the person behind the counter who was the owner, and we call her Mrs. Horner in the book. That's not her real name, but you remember Mrs. Horner with the pie, and so that's the name we gave her. So Paul had a conversation with her, and because he was curious, because he had the ability to just have a conversation with anyone, she didn't feel intimidated. She was happy to have a conversation. He was honest that he wasn't going to be a competitor because he was bringing the idea back here. So he wasn't going to compete with her in Australia. And she gave away some secrets, maybe not all, but some secrets.
The really good guidance, I think. It wasn't so much secrets, but it was great guidance. But it was obvious stuff in terms of constructing the business. The other thing that I should mention at this point too is that I spent an inordinate amount of time coming up with a business plan. And it looked beautiful. Lovely graphics. I spent a lot of time on PowerPoint doing this stuff, and magnificent spreadsheets, and the usual sort of optimistic, pessimistic, and realistic scenarios. And we can come back and talk about that later, how optimistic they really were. But you do have to do that. If you can't articulate your business plan or your business concept rather, and put it on paper, it's very difficult to communicate it to anybody else. because you haven't thought it through properly, or you haven't been able to think it through. It's a really, really, you may never show it to anybody, but the mere fact that you went through the process gets your head in the right place, so that you know you've had that discipline of thinking about a lot of angles.
And I mean, that all sounds great. It sounds like, Paul, you were good at lots of different things. So you were good at the Excel sheets, you created a business plan, you were very affable, as Sylvana explains, you were a good salesman. But actually, and you need all of these things as part of your team, and if you're a sole founder, and more importantly, but a lot of people won't have all of those skills, but it's required. So what do you do if that is an issue? So if you're very strong on it, on the data or on the impact side, but not so strong in the kind of business development side, if you're a sole founder, or if your team has very kind of similar skills, how do you manage that?
I think, can I kick it off? Sure. Yeah, I think it's a really important point, because at the very early stages, you can't afford to pay anybody. You're not going to be able to recruit, I don't know, a salesperson and say, look, we'd love you to come and work for us, but we can't afford you. So, that's just not practical. But you can bring people around you initially who have complementary skills. So they're not all the same person. So if you've got 5 people who can do coding, for instance, that's not going to help you. You don't need 5 people who do coding. You need somebody who can do coding, somebody who can do sales, somebody who can do marketing, whatever it is whatever the business is that you're in. So you may want these people around you, but you won't be able to get them. The other thing is that you can't afford to pay them typically, but you can afford to give them some equity in the business. So to give them some cut of the ownership of the business. And a lot of people, in my observation, is that they are happy, depending on their circumstances, to do that, but they're not going to give you 100% of their time, because they simply can't afford to. They still need a day job. And in fact, you may need a day job as well. So there are a few rules I think you need to go through with that, so that everybody understands what the rules of engagement are. And if that's, if you can commit to 10 hours a week, or working from 6 to 10 p.m. or something, or whatever those rules are, then people understand what they have to give in return for part ownership of this business.
And if I can supplement what Paul's saying, so in other words, if you're a sole trader or the sole entrepreneur, as LJ has said, you're not going to have that full complement of skills. And as Paul said, you bring in some other people. But that's the thing. How do you find those people? What sort of conversations do you have with them? How do you clarify the expectations? Because particularly if they're mates, or your romantic partner or whatever, there's lots of assumptions people make without clarifying, and that can lead to a lot of bad blood down the track, or that can lead to, sometimes it can lead to very costly lawsuits, etc. So the ability to have conversations with clarity, where you talk about what each other is expecting, where you create a partnership and a contract, as it were, is really important. And we spend quite a bit of time in the book on that, because it is those hidden assumptions that can get in the way. You trust your mates, or your girlfriend, boyfriend, wife, husband, whatever. But if you haven't clarified things, you're likely to run into some misunderstandings and some problems. So get things clear on the table right from the word go. Don't just assume that you're both on the same page, as the Americans would say.
Yeah. Oh, I've got so many questions. Nawad, have you got any questions? Anything you wanted to comment on there?
Yeah, that was very interesting, because now I'm also thinking about engaging a specialist in my business, and for me it's a big task how to communicate with them, what incentives can I propose to them to join my team, how to find the right people, because it's very difficult, challenging, and it's one of the most important parts to find the right people, right stakeholders, co-founders to succeed in your business. Yeah, and it is something that I'm definitely interested in.
Yeah. And as I say, the key to all of this is the conversation, how you have that conversation, what you're assuming, what they're assuming, whether things are clear between you. So learning to have the conversation, having the courage to go out and have the conversation, and being explicit, not just implicit, is really important.
Yeah. So do you think people, so for example, if Navad doesn't have £100,000 to pay a CTO, but wants to kind of wants to bring them on as a partner, a co-founder, what kind of, where is that tipping point? Where do you think people, why do you think people make the decisions to be kind of co-founders in a business? Is it the person, the idea, combination, anything else?
I think it's all of those things, but it's they have to. You often hear about, you know, shared vision and so on. It's partly that, I think, but it's more shared passion that this sounds great and I'd like to be involved. And it's kind of like it's almost a privilege to be involved. But it's you have to, whether you work for a big corporation or you're doing a startup as you're thinking of doing, the interaction of people is very important to the success of the unit or the company or the whatever it is you're doing. So it doesn't mean you all have to be friends. It just means you have to have some respect and interaction, which is enjoyable. It's that it's challenging, enjoyable. It's achieving it. You don't want a situation where, and it often happens, where somebody loses a bit of interest, so other people have to carry their load. People get resentful. People's circumstances change, of course, too. It's whatever that might be, and that could let other people down. So it sounds insurmountable, all of this, but it's not. It's more. It's surprising how you can pull it together, but you have to give it attention.
Yeah, it's attention, it's intention, it's attention, and it's actual commitment, right? And it's discipline. So what we were saying earlier is if you make too many assumptions, if you don't make it explicit, then you run the risk of misunderstanding. And we've observed, because in terms of one of the ways that we've helped people come up with sounding boards, if you like, is we were running peer advisory circles. So we'd bring in a group of people from different businesses, so they weren't competing, so they wouldn't have that sort of issue, but they would come together to share a challenge or an opportunity, and each would ask questions for clarification, and then would give some ideas and some, contacts or network, etc., etc. And we often found that where there were co-founders, there could be tensions, and the co-founders often came together because they had skills that were, one was a tech genius, but the other was a salesperson, or one was, a really good manager, but the other one was really good at detail, etc. So they come together because they, as Paul says, they have a shared passion around that product or service, and they can see the gap in the market or the innovation that they can create. But again, you have to be very explicit and sit down and share what it is you want to achieve. Talk in it. It's like a prenup, I guess, talk in advance. Well, what happens if we hit a roadblock? What happens if we have really different views about how this is going to? So the more explicit, the more you can get things out there, the better you're guarding yourself for, roadblocks down the track.
And maybe that's a good point to kind of feel free, Navad, to come back. And the point around roadblocks and the reality of hitting roadblocks quite often, quite early on in your business. How did you deal with them? And looking back now, how should you have dealt with them?
Yeah, you got the habit of asking really hard questions, Elsa.
Sorry, I want to stretch you.
They're good questions, but they're toughies. There are a constant barrage of roadblocks and roadblocks perhaps a bit strong. I think it's challenges is probably a little bit better. They're all surmountable, and depending on your state of mind, in a way, as to how easy or otherwise that's going to be. Sylvana can talk about, if you wouldn't mind in a moment, self-awareness, which is really probably the most important thing of the whole shebang. But if you don't recognize alternatives, then you won't even discard them because you didn't see them. Now, I'll give you a silly example to start with, and a more difficult one in a minute. The silly one was we started doing deliveries. directly from the production kitchen. So if somebody in Wales, say, was going to have a Sunday lunch and they wanted 20 pies delivered to them, we would deliver them frozen or chilled, and they would then heat them up. They'd have instructions in the box, right? It happens every day here, easily, with Deliveroo and whatever. At that time, Deliveroo didn't exist. Just Eat didn't exist. Uber Eats didn't exist. We used the post office, and they had a guaranteed next day delivery. So we had a 24-hour window to keep this food frozen or cold. So we went to a factory, I guess it is, that supplied dry ice. And we wanted 500 grams of dry ice to pack into this thing. And they sent us 500 kilos of dry ice. Now, I don't know if you know anything about dry ice, but it's minus 75 degrees or something, and it evaporates unless it's kept at minus 75 degrees. So we watched 500 kilograms of dry ice evaporated. And we said, we argued with them. We didn't want 500 kilograms. They said, well, that's our minimum order. So that was a roadblock. What do? We changed the way we thought about it. We used a completely different way of doing it, which was successful. But it seemed like the obvious one at the outset. The more difficult roadblocks were generally to do with, and there were quite a few, I guess, but challenges of finding the right people who would work in the business. Now, I'm not talking co-founders now or people who are kicking it off, but I'm talking employees. You're engaging employees to do a specific skill. It may be an unskilled job that they're doing, like stuffing envelopes or whatever it is, but they're still doing that. And we came across a whole array of issues that we had to deal with between people who didn't have a visa to work in this country. Most of the people who were working in our food production didn't speak English. So then we had to have signs written around the place in Polish, in whatever, to tell them the instructions of what to do at their particular station. If you'd asked me that at the outset, where we have to do it, it wouldn't have even occurred to me. So it wasn't a block, but it was something that had to be dealt with. So it's kind of like all this stuff happens and you can't anticipate it, except the only thing you can anticipate is something's going to happen and you're going to have to deal with it.
Brilliant. And I've just seen a question. Oh, yeah.
Yes, I was going to say, I've just noticed, so I've got the chat on the side. So
fantastic. Are you okay to answer that question, guys? Around, this is a really interesting question. So around whether there's a certain, certain personality that is more kind of suited to the entrepreneurial journey, or anyone that just has a real passion. What do you think there? Great question, Emma.
Yeah, excellent question. So I guess I'm a little conflicted actually in the answer, because I would certainly say that there are definitely people who are better suited, the people who can take knocks, the people who see a challenge as, oh, okay, so that's just some, it's like, rather than I can't get through this, it's like, how do I go around it? How do I go over it? How do I go under it? So they get excited actually by the challenge. That's working out that puzzle is what drives them. There are other people who are more methodical, if you like. So apropos the differences between Paul and me, I was a financial analyst, right? So I started with, what was my downside risk? What was the capital that was at risk for our unit holders, for our investors? So I looked always for the negative first, not the upside. Paul was a salesperson and has what we jokingly call happy years. So to that point earlier about the 3 scenarios for the plan, which was excellent, tick a box, Paul did that. But he was so optimistic anyway that even his grim prospects were always really, really positive. Whereas I'd probably be the reverse. My positive would probably be reasonably grim. So the sort of training you get and the life experiences you have color the way you see opportunities or how you see challenges. So I think those people who are more nimble, who enjoy a challenge, who can think outside the box, who aren't afraid of asking, they're probably more likely to have that entrepreneur, because we know several, so we talk in the book about one of Paul's mentors, who was Martin Miller. If any of you like gin, that's the Martin Miller. The gin is the eponymous gin. So Martin, at some point, I loved Martin. He was such a great storyteller, an excellent raconteur. And he shared with us that, one, he was dyslexic. So at school, he was treated as though he was stupid. So he left school at 16, I think.
14, 16. Yeah.
And he had a whole series of businesses that made squillions, lost squillions, made squillions, lost squillions. But he just had that spirit where it was like, okay, another knock, but what else can I find? So I would say there are people who are more predisposed to, as I say, see a knock or see a challenge as, okay, I'll get around it, I'll get over it, I'll find something. And others who are, you know, they're held back because they focus on the downside first, like I would. You know, they're intimidated by failure, so they don't take, you know, they're more risk averse, if you like. And successful entrepreneurs have a risk appetite that is greater than your average person, I would say. Is that what you would say?
Yeah, I think so. Like I said earlier, that when I got exposed to starting up new businesses, but as an entrepreneur, that was successful businesses, it gives you a buzz. And once you got the buzz, it's hard not to seek out another buzz. And I'm still seeking out buzzes, and we can talk about that later. But but I love that process. It's a very creative, energetic. It's tremendously satisfying. I mean, Humble Pie didn't survive, but that doesn't mean it was terrible or grim through the entire experience. In fact, it wasn't. It was great. It was just that it had a short life, but you know, there you go. You know, it failed for a number of reasons. But as Sylvana points out in the book, and also in other conversations, the person didn't fail, the business failed. It's a bit like being made redundant. The person isn't redundant, the job's redundant. So it's the same kind of thing. You don't take it too personally, but you got to be very involved.
And actually, I'm curious, LJ. So in terms of the competition, what sort of answers did the students come up with? Did they think there was an entrepreneurial mindset, or?
Yeah, I think there was a mix. So Alice is actually jumping on in a minute, and she's going to go through the answers because she's just gone through them. So I will let you know. But I think just from talking to students and from looking at it, I think there's a stereotype that the entrepreneurial person is kind of very, very kind of risk taking, as you said, rightly so, very ideas driven. And I think where people then come a little bit unstuck is because they are so ideas driven, they're less on the kind of execution and kind of organization level. And so sometimes that can really cause problems. We see these kind of entrepreneurs that are just gung-ho and it's brilliant and they get stuff done, they're agile. But actually when we're looking for them to kind of, I don't know, tie a project and write up an impact report, or actually send us their kind of end of year taxes, quite often they're on it. So they're so kind of focused on kind of seeing results that they don't sometimes see those kind of slightly more nuanced organizational kind of administrative duties. And I guess where it comes in handy is where you've got a bit of money and you can kind of outsource that to, say, a bookkeeper or a secretary or whatever it is. But in those early stages, I think a lot of the reasons the students fail is because the preparation isn't there and the kind of groundwork. And that's asking for a lot in terms of a mindset, you know what I mean? In terms of a skill set, you want that kind of ideation, you want that kind of risk taker, but you also want someone who's going to jot down the points and actually remind you to get it done.
Yeah,
absolutely.
And that's why in the book we talk a lot about either peer advisory circles or having a mentor or having a coach, you know, having some sounding boards, because otherwise you can fall in love with your idea. You know, that's one of the things. If you're really, really passionate about it, you will potentially be defensive when people sort of say, oh, well, what about this sort of, you know, there isn't the sufficient market for it, or that's a really quirky idea, or, you know. So what you need to be able to do is to listen to that sort of the naysayer, because you're going to encounter naysayers all the time, and just sort of spend a little time reflecting on it and thinking, okay, well, are they making some valid points? Do I really need to test, learn, and tweak my idea, my project, my product, etc.? Or actually, is it really because I am the visionary and the people that I'm speaking with don't have that vision? So there's a lot, you know, for an entrepreneur to be successful, you're balancing this tension between, you know, reaching for the stars, but having your feet on the ground, being, you know, relentless in your conviction that this thing will work, and actually not being stubborn about it, but really taking on board if there are some real obstacles. You know, so it is a tension, or it is a balance, and that's why it's very helpful to have an impartial view from someone else. And hence who you surround yourself with, who you have the conversations with, where you find the support is really important.
And I've seen there's a follow-up question as well from Emma. Thanks again, Emma, and Navad, feel free to come in. It's around, the tools. Is a young entrepreneur, future skill. Are there any particular tools? My friend. You can call your friend in a bit, okay? You like to use to scope ideas and record your thoughts? Great question.
Yeah, I think it's a pretty kind of analog answer, actually. Get yourself a notebook and carry it around with you, and you've got a camera in your phone, and that's basically all you need. You just need to be able to pop in, if you see something that catches your eye. It could be a shop window, it could be in a park, it could be on the tube and they've got some ad or whatever it is. Who knows what it is? But if you've got a notebook and a pen and a phone with a camera, which 99% of people have got all of those things, that's all you need. But it is important. You won't remember it, but if you jot down these ideas as you're going along, I do, as you know, LJ, quite a bit of writing, and that's how I do it. I just carry. I either make a note on my phone if I haven't got some paper with me, or I'll just jot it down.
And again, it's a mindset or a filter, right? You practice and you learn this. So
you start noticing.
Yeah, you start noticing, right? So it's again the notion of self-awareness, and how do you practice that self-awareness or that awareness around you? And to Paul's point about writing, so Paul also does poetry. And so we invariably, you know, we're reading the paper, we're reading a book, we're seeing a sign, and we go, oh, hang on, that's a curious word, or that's something we're not familiar with. So we jot it down and then come back to it and try and expand on it. And LJ, can you pull up one of those slides?
Which one?
You can see our grey hair, right? So we're a little bit more analog than you guys are. And I know there are lots of tools out there like Miro and Mural and various, what do they call them? Mind map tools, etc. Go to the first one, if you go back one, if you could. Yeah, there you go. So we're to our analog nature, right? So we wanted to be creative. We wanted to bring in some ways of thinking about things differently. So we would jot down ideas. We would get big sheets of paper. We would do brainstorming around these sorts of mind maps. We had these, in fact, that's Paul presenting at a peer advisory group. So we got other people to give us some perspectives as well. We would write things. We would share them between each other. And we would sort of go, well, does that work? Does that not work? How would you do this? What area can you see that's not quite working? What am I missing out on? What am I blind to? So again, you cultivate curiosity, you cultivate experimentation, and it's a mindset thing around the notion of failure, right? So, very few ideas are successful from the get-go. They will have to have multiple iterations, that you will be practicing things, you will be testing them. Just don't test them in the biggest market, having thrown the most money at it. Do a pop-up market. Again, try a focus group, try your mates, try things small first, and then you can scale up from there. Don't throw all your money at it right from the word go. Thanks, LJ. I just wanted to show a couple of visuals.
And that's really great. And I guess for someone like Nawad or Emma, who are kind of in the early stages of starting up their business, when you are kind of scoping out new ideas or kind of having launched your business, and you at the beginning you were really kind of dead set on it, but you've done a bit of testing, you've done a bit of beta testing, and at what point do you give up? Like, should you just, like, we talk about resilience and we talk about perseverance, but also you need to be sensible and actually not throw a whole load of money at something that just doesn't have legs. So at what point do you think it's probably worth throwing in the towel? And I hate that question, but I feel like we have a responsibility to ask it.
Yeah, in the spirit of the tough questions that you're asking, that's number 3. It's a very, very important question, but it's also equivalent in a sense to pushing the button to go, or you're going to push the button to stop. And it's the same process, I think. And you get to the point where you think you've ticked all the boxes, you've done the research, you've spoken to people, you've done a business plan, you've shown it to somebody, you've got a mentor that you can chat to give them, they can more than chat, but have discussions with. All of those things are very upfront. And before you commit, I mean, some of those things, by the way, will cost a little bit of money, but not much. You may have to buy a subscription to some research or something or other, but you're not talking much money. But at some point, the rubber's going to hit the road and you're either going to do it or you're not going to do it, or you're just going to keep on researching. You've got to that point, and if on balance, there's enough positive feedback from your mentor, from the independent people who have had a look at your idea and your business plan and have pulled apart, if you like, the spreadsheet that you've done and seeing whether it really truly is realistic, then you can push that button to go. And you're taking a bit of a gulp, but you do. You can also press that same button to stop. If you want to press the button to go, make sure it's not because you've fallen in love with the product or the business plan, because that could be deadly, because you're doing it because you just love the idea too much. You shouldn't love the idea too much.
That's such an interesting take on it and really helpful. Thanks both. Nawad, did you have any other questions?
Yes, I would like to know more about, I'm just curious about your entrepreneurial journey and the challenges, the failures, the stresses that you faced and how you overcome these disappointments. In other words, how to become more stress resilient. And how do you think it's an important skill for an entrepreneur?
Yeah, such a good question, especially during these times, the kind of weathering the storms. So great, timely question.
And again, LJ, if it's possible, could you bring up the timeline so that will show you I think it's the 3rd slide in the. Great, yeah. So do you want to speak through?
Yeah, it might be a little bit hard to read, but we can talk to it anyway. It's in the book, but there we are. I think well, why don't you kick it off? Sorry.
Okay. So I guess what we're trying to demonstrate here is that prior to starting the business, as Paul mentioned, he put in, he was so keen to do something that was tangible, coming from a financial services world. So he wanted to actually make something, as in a product. Hence, he was looking around for ideas, and he found the light bulb moment by just observing. So he was, people who are lucky. So I find this an interesting thing. People who are lucky are curious, and they're lucky because they notice things, because stuff is happening all the time. But those of us that are, have a negative bent just don't notice. Our vision is, our lateral vision is narrowed. Whereas if we're constantly out there and curious and having conversations and getting involved and being energized, we will see things. So other people notice the opportunity and run with it. Some people, it's right in front of them and they don't notice. So he had the light bulb moment. He went out and he did the research. He created some recipes. you know, he spoke to people, he found a scientist, they did some lab testing, and in fact, you reverse engineered the pastry, didn't you?
Yep.
Because the pastry was the secret ingredient, which we never give away. So there are 3 recipes at the back of this, but we use
a shopboard
pastry. Then, you know, there was the designing of the personality of the business and the product, and that was really important. And again, Paul leveraged the skills of a number of different, like brand specialists. And another thing I'd say too is Paul used his network very well. And I mean use in a positive sense, I don't mean manipulate. So cultivate a network of people, cultivate people who can make contacts for you, who can make suggestions, who can put you in contact with others. He wrote the business plan. He put a board of advisors together. Try and make sure you have a number of people who have some experience, or, you know, a few grey hairs. You probably don't want all grey hairs, but a few grey hairs there. And then he had to recruit the general manager. He had a mobile trailer that went out to the festivals. He had to do a location research, and he recruited for the production kitchen. And so year 1, so this is all pre-trading. Year 1, as you can see, our designer, we quite liked what she put together here. So year 1, he did really well. He had the sales at the Longleat Festival. He fitted out and opened the first shop in Buckingham Gate, and he recruited some additional staff. Year 2, he fitted it out and opened the second shop on Portobello Road. So those of you that are familiar with the famous Portobello Road, fitted it out and opened a concession in Harrods. So, and that was another network connection. So he asked someone how to get a hold of, she was quite senior at Harrods at the time, and she said, just ring up such and such. You know, so he used his extended network, and he cultivates, I mean, in a very positive sense. So it's about getting to know people, getting to know what they care about, offering things to them. It's a reciprocal thing. It's not about, well, obviously pre-COVID, when, I don't know if any of you have gone to any networking events. Johnny may have gone to some of these. So when you go to those events where people are sort of looking past you to the next person they can go off and sell to, or grab their business card, or that's transactional. That's not going to get you the sorts of openings and ideas and connections that you need. So you need to cultivate, you need to tend and nurture the people around you, your connections and your network. Then, sorry, no, go ahead.
I was going to say that then helps you deal with any of the issues which may arise between. We're okay with the slide now, LJ. Thank you. But that can help you deal with some of the issues that arise, which may be funding, because you've constructed or developed a network of people. It's very hard to do it just by yourself in one room. Yeah, you may need certain skills, but it's beyond that. A lot of people who helped me in this business and previous businesses that I was involved in weren't owners of the business or employees of the business. They were simply people I knew. So, for instance, prior to the pie business, for quite a long time, I was the co-founder of an economics research business, where we did research and then we sold it into the professional investing market. And that was largely created, well, the core was created by the skills of the people who actually created the business. But the business success came entirely from the network of people that we had, and how we promoted it and what we did with it, and the skills that we developed within ourselves to do it. In general, the issue that I think most people in business, including entrepreneurs, grapple with and enjoy the most, so it's both ends of the spectrum of people. It's the hardest part of business is, managing money is easy compared to managing people, because people are much more, what's the word? Not random, but everybody is unique. That's the word I'm looking for. They have needs and they have circumstances and so on around it. Now, we had in the humble pie business, 35 people who at any one time who were working for us. Over 5 years, because that business tends to be pretty transient, and we had uni students and so on, we had close to over 300 employees over that period of time. So we had an extraordinary number of issues we had to deal with, some good issues and some not so great issues, but we had issues. We had people who, one was an important supplier to us who went broke, and they owed us product we'd already paid for. You have to come up with a process of dealing with that. And the best way I found, and I think it's worked every time for me, is you don't try and do it yourself. You get other people to help you get through it. And even a mentor who's not going to actually go and do a meeting with you necessarily, but can give you some tips, give you some ideas. But trying to do it yourself is too hard.
Yeah, and I tend to challenge the notion of the self-made entrepreneur, the self-made this, the self-made that, because even if it's your own idea and you're putting all the energy in it, you have to have conversations with someone. You have to get the funding, or you have to get, experiment with your idea, or you're working with the designer, or so you aren't on your own. You have to get good at having conversations and being curious and interested, and as we say, nurturing the people that you're engaged with.
Did that answer the question for you?
Sorry?
Did that answer the question?
Yes, completely. Thank you very much.
Oh, you're welcome.
Interesting.
Now,
so I got to jump onto another meeting, but just very quickly picking up on Sylvana's point, never underestimate a network, because as an entrepreneur, you have skills that you know what they are, but in order to make a business work, you need other skills. And if you can find within your network people that are not your skills but enhance you, so you might develop a Hoover, but you can't sell it, you can't market it. So, and those people will give you advice and they'll give you help willingly. So never underestimate the network. And on Paul's point, there is a risk attached to being an entrepreneur. Otherwise, everyone would do it.
Sure. Yeah.
But if you do your homework, like both these guys have done, if you I forget that term. If you fail to plan, you plan to fail, or whichever way around it is. It's important that these guys' advice is saying that there is a valuable network in there, and it doesn't cost money. Trust me. Paul and I launched a business together. And we were different, but together we were a very powerful unit. And so I would say it's really important, through your university, through your LSE, through your graduation, these people grow up to be business leaders, and they will help you develop your business. And because they're friends, they'll do it. You don't necessarily want their advice, but you need to phone them and say, well, how do I sell this? How do I market this? How do I build this? How do I do that? So, 100% behind the humble pie philosophy. And those are important lessons that you can actually, it doesn't cost anything to learn, but once you learn them, it will prove your business. And Paul and Sylvana, thank you. LJ, thank you. I've got to run. But anyway, I can help anybody, then just let me know.
No, thank you so much, Jonathan. And I know we're about to move into you're going to show us how to make a pie, guys.
Yes.
Oh, fantastic. Just before we do, I've just had some the Instas coming in around what they think it takes to be an entrepreneur and around the entrepreneurial mindset. One of them thinks there are no bans to becoming an entrepreneur, but as a mentor told me this month, they all have to keep on going and not give up. So the kind of resilience and kind of perseverance side. Entrepreneurship could be looked at in terms of nature and nurture. If we foster a culture of entrepreneurship from an early age, then we can seed a culture of innovation that not only drives economies forward, but also ensures a fair and safe society for all. Someone's come in and said that actually it's those answers combined. You can foster entrepreneurship, but without fostering and continuously feeding determination, entrepreneurial mindsets would never succeed. And then just two more. One person said, yeah, anyone can be an entrepreneur, but what especially helps is the environment that stimulates it. Definitely echo what's been said in the comments. Nature and nurture coming together guarantees more innovation. Love seeing people entering the path of an entrepreneur in all stages of life. Very inspiring. And finally, yes, I believe that anyone can be an entrepreneur. Being a successful entrepreneur is quite difficult enough. I do believe that great entrepreneurs can be of a variety of characters, from introvert, interesting, to completely outgoing, etc. There are some critical soft skills that are crucial for an entrepreneur to succeed. The most important, resilience and delegation. Resilience, because especially in the early stages, there's going to be setbacks. And unless you're committed to the project, then eventually you'll be discouraged from continuing. And secondly, delegation, because as new numbers start being added to the team, it's crucial to make them feel a core and important part of the project. So some really interesting insights there. Thanks, Jonathan, for that comment. Now, Nevada and Emma and I are really excited to know how to make this magical pie.
So we're going down to the kitchen. So if you can just put up that slide with our contact details. So we're very happy, apropos the notion of cultivating your network and getting to know each other, etc. We'd love to connect with the various people that are going to be watching this in the future, and obviously with about tonight. So if you can connect with us on LinkedIn or on Twitter or on Instagram,
whatever.
We'd love you to read the book, because we would like to write potentially another one, and we want to know what's next. What would you like more of? What would you like to go into more deeply? Because this is very much a primer. It's short. So we with the entrepreneur in mind, we know that time is precious. So you don't want a tome, you don't want huge things. And if you're still studying, you're also reading a lot of text as it is anyway. So this is reasonably short. There's a few diagrams. There's bullet points at the end of each slice. We call each chapter a slice. So that they're what we call crumbs of wisdom. So they're designed to help reinforce what are you learning as you go through. Lots and lots of questions for you to reflect on. And then a table of actions and insights, again, as like a resource for you to come back to as you're going through this. But we're going to go downstairs to the kitchen.
We'll see you in about a minute or less.
Great.
Good on you.
Okay, see you shortly.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. And guys, thank you so much for the questions. Navad, I hope you found that discussion, and Emma, really helpful. And anyone that is listening on the recording, I hope that gave you some really valuable insights as you start to potentially plot out that roadmap for life as an entrepreneur. Now we're just waiting, as if by magic they appear in the kitchen. Ta-da!
I mean, what flavour is the pie? All will be revealed.
Well, it's the worst time to be doing it because I am starving.
I'm so hungry and I won't want anything but pie.
Let them eat pie.
Yeah.
And we've also got some wine to help us along. Do you guys have anything to drink or to keep yourselves libated?
I think I do, actually.
Yes.
Emma, have you got a drink?
I don't have a drink. I feel ashamed of myself. I should have thought of that.
Well, and I'm also conscious that you've been sitting down for quite a period of time. So do you guys need to get up, go to the loo, get yourself some water, or get yourself
I might go and make a cup of tea, actually. That's a good idea.
Cool.
Okay. Right.
Back in a tick.
We're all set up, and then we'll give it a couple of minutes.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Great. So we've got all the... Yep, sure.
That's terrific.
Great. And I guess, LJ, you might want to take the slide off so that we'll have the full screen to...
Wonderful.
Demo.
Oh, and do you want your penny?
Oh, yeah.
So domesticated, Paul. So domesticated.
I am.
You need a humble Crummel penny, don't you?
The other great thing about being an entrepreneur is you learn real quick how to do just about everything.
Yes, you've got to multitask quite a bit.
You've got to multitask. You discover that you will find you have to do tasks that you had no idea that you were capable of doing. So.
And actually, that's a good point, because the idea of multitasking is a bit of a fallacy, and Paul actually raises it in the book, because I think one of the stresses and strains, someone earlier was asking, how do you keep yourself going and so on? And one of the stresses and strains was that he was juggling just too many things simultaneously.
Yeah.
And so the way the brain works, I'm very interested in neuroscience, the way the brain works. And what you find is if you can block certain similar tasks for, an hour or 45 minutes, rather than flipping between things, and particularly in this day and age when we're so keen on social media and the ping of, oh my God, who's responded, how many likes, what's out there, how am I curating my personal brand, all of that sort of thing. But if you can set some boundaries and actually just focus on the one thing that's similar. So, if you're doing accounts, do all the math type things at that time. If you're doing something else, just do the, if you're going to do your email or do your social media, put a boundary around it. And that's the way you'll help yourself be more efficient and effective in some of those skills.
Great.
Shall we start, or we wait for Emma to come back?
I think go for it, because you can also watch the recording afterwards as well. You snooze, you lose.
Sure. 1 second. Oh, there we are. Great. Can you hear? No, sorry. I've just changed something here that I didn't mean to do.
It's the view. So it's the speaker view.
Oh, I see. I beg your pardon.
Great. I think we won't have it like that. You'll just
Oh, okay. You got it?
Yeah.
You good?
Yeah, go for it. Excited.
I'm sorry, I'm going to do one more thing here just to... No, that's not going to work. I beg your pardon. I was trying to get the full view here, but that's all right. We're good. Okay, I'm going to go through what tools you need. So get your piece of paper and a pencil.
I'm going to go and get my daughter. I'm going to go and get my daughter to watch this, because she's applying for Junior Bake Off, so she'll love this.
Oh, okay.
No,
okay.
Very important.
Start with the tools.
Right. These are the tools you need. We'll start with the tools. You need a knife. You need a rolling pin. If you haven't got a rolling pin, use a wine bottle.
Yeah.
It's perfectly fine. You need a fork, you need a paring knife and a spoon, a frying pan, and a wooden spoon, ideally. And for the ingredients, and pie tins, most important. These are the ones I use. They're about 4.5 inches, which I think is around 11 centimetres, something like that in diameter. You can get them on Amazon. They're really easy. But you can also get different shapes, so depending on what you want to make. But I'm using these ones. And now you need ingredients. So maybe I should wait until LJ comes back for 1 second, and then we can talk about the ingredients.
Okay, I'm back.
You're back. So the ingredients, hello. The ingredients we need is some ground beef, some minced beef, an onion, garlic. Now, we're not going to use the entire bulb of garlic because you'll kill all your friends, or you won't have any friends left, but we're going to use 2 or 3 segments of it, depending on how much you like garlic. So tonight I'm going to use 2. You need some beef stock powder, and you need, and this is a secret ingredient, nutmeg. So the list was on the Eventbrite thing, but if you need it again, let me know, or it's in the book. Or
buy the book. We've got 3 recipes in the book.
So that's basically, you may need a little bit of flour to thicken it up, but I'll come to that in just a minute. So if I can pop these over here for a second.
Yep.
What we're going to do first is get the meat going. So we've got the oven on, that's great. We're going to get the meat going. And the onion first. So with the onion, what you want to do, turn that down a little bit so you can see what I'm doing. There you go.
Yep.
What we're going to do with the onion is make it into quite small dices. Now, that's not as hard as it sounds. It's simply a bit of patience and making sure you don't cut your finger off while you're doing it, which is always a negative. So we're going to peel the onion. We've got these onions that are resisting peeling. There we are. And if you've never seen this before, this is a technique. I've cut the onion in half, right? If you start cutting the onion like this across the top, this is called the Marseille version of, or technique of dicing onions. You just put cuts down all the way. They're all cut that way. Now we're going to cut it this way. And lo and behold, you end up with small diced onion. It's really easy, and you don't have any dramas.
And you watch your fingers
and
too.
You watch your fingers. And we do the other half. Same story. Because you don't want to find great big chunks of onion in the middle of your pie. It's not great. So again, cut it that way, then cut it this way. There we are. Now, we've got the onion cut, it's looking good. We get a bit of olive oil in the pan. Not much, just a bit.
You can see, yep.
And we get the, would you mind turning it on?
I'm the sous chef.
Now, while Sylvana is doing that, yep, that's it. Probably on about medium. You don't want to burn anything. Can I have the, yeah, great.
2 garlic.
Yeah, I'm just going to use two pieces of garlic, but some people prefer a lot more. That's fine. Some people don't like garlic, which I haven't met them yet, but I'm sure they're out there. But garlic is really adds a really nice taste to it. There you go. There we are.
Can I stir the onions for you?
Yeah, sure. Why don't you get going on the onions and I'll get going on the garlic. Sure.
Is this the secret recipe that we're about to discover, or are you going to make us turn off our videos at some point?
The pastry, which was really the secret recipe, as we mentioned earlier, we don't disclose. That stays secret. However, one of the things that Paul just mentioned earlier in terms of the ingredients for this is some nutmeg. Nutmeg gives us a nice little taste that you often don't find in these sorts of. So I'm really just browning the onions. We want to make sure they become translucent and not burned off.
You don't want to burn them, yeah. You just want to get them so that they're. So with the garlic, all I'm doing is just chopping it up. If you've got a garlic press, you know, the garlic mincer, you could use that too. There we are. Throw it in there. Okay, keep that going for a bit, and then we'll put the mince in, okay? And you break up the mince. So you want
that beef mince.
Can you see that okay?
Yeah, is that beef or is that pork? And what would you recommend if you're a vegetarian?
Yes, this one is an Aussie beef pie. So as Paul mentions in the book, an Aussie pie tends not to have vegetables. The meat pie is just principally, well, apart from obviously the onion, but it doesn't tend to have carrots or peas or whatever. So this is largely just the ground minced beef with the onion and the garlic. So we're just browning it.
what you'll find with this, it may get a little bit dry, so you want to put a little bit of water in it. But if you don't want to make it too sloppy because it's just not pleasant. But if you just keep on cooking it, you probably need to cook this, my guess is about 20 minutes or so. And you'll end up with a really nice and brown. It's almost, you can't overcook it, but you don't want to undercook it. You want to have it really nice. If it's still a little bit too dry, add some water. If it's too, if it isn't thick enough, add a little bit of corn flour just to thicken it up a bit. You got it?
So as we're browning, should we put in the cinnamon and the beef stock?
So we'll put the beef stock in now. And then we'll put the
Nutmeg.
I'm going to put the cinnamon in. And we want to put in some salt. And we want to put in some pepper.
I think you need a bit more salt in there, though.
It has a fair bit of salt. The thing is that when you're wrapping everything up inside a pastry, because it's a carbohydrate, unless you put stronger flavours in, you can't taste them. You can only taste the pastry.
So you can see it's coming along, it's browning. The onions are translucent. And that's the seasoning, as Paul says, I mean, it's to taste. So again, this is another version of experimentation, right? So make it as per the quantities we've given you. And then if you want it a little bit spicier or if you want it less salty or whatever, just experiment. This is an iterative process. This is entrepreneurship in cooking.
Now we're going to do the pastry, okay? So I've got some plain flour here. We're going to spread some plain flour out on a board or on a, in my case, I put this going here beautifully. And I use shop bought. You can either, this happens to be a block of puff pastry, but you can use the ones, I think everybody's seen them where it's already rolled. And you can use that for sure. It's entirely up to you what you can get a hold of. Even the ones that you buy that are already rolled, you can roll them out more because they're fairly thick. So with these, now we want to roll it out. You want to use plenty of flour because it'll stick otherwise, and that's not what you want. So turn it this way and that way, roll it out until you've got the thickness you want, which is fairly thin. Now, it's not so thin that it's going to fall apart, but it is fairly thin. The other good thing about making pies is you can make a mess.
Yeah.
Okay, we've got it. That's all it took. Oh, sorry, one more thing that Sylvana's going to pop in there is some tomato paste. Okay, and you want a tablespoonful or thereabouts in there.
Yeah. So
and you mix that through. Okay, we've got the pastry. Now, Sylvana, can you see the pastry okay?
Yeah, we can see that.
Okay. You get one of your pie tins, okay? You turn it upside down and you put your pie tin on the top of the pastry and then cut a ring around it about 1 centimetre bigger than the pie tin. It doesn't have to be exact. It's roughly 1 centimetre. And then you're going to do another one, about the same.
Do you want to butter the tin?
Yeah, just can you do that for me?
Sure.
Just behind you.
Yeah.
So now we're going to have 2 approximately circular rings of pastry. Oh, wait. Which are now bigger than the pie tins.
And what I'm doing whilst Paul is preparing that is just buttering the pie tin. Even though it's Teflon, we find that it works better if there's a little bit of butter on it.
Otherwise, the pie might stick. So then put your pastry on top
And then you can see what I'm doing here. I'm going to push the pastry in like that around the edges and the base of the pie tin. So you've got to have some sticking over the edge. That's fine. And you see how we're doing it there? It's got the shape of the pie tin. Then we also have magically some of the pie filling that we already made up. And you're going to put that in there. So this is one that we made earlier before the show.
And in fact, that's an important point, right? So with the mince that's been cooked, ideally you cover it and put it in the fridge and leave it overnight, right? So you do not put hot mince into the pie base, otherwise it will not work well. So we're doing this in a way that's a little artificial because we've got them all here to assemble, but you would normally have made this last night or say earlier this morning, so it's completely cold when it goes into the pie base.
If you are just doing it like you're going to have people coming around for Saturday night and you find out Saturday morning, that's fine. Just let it get cold first. If you put the hot filling, whatever the filling is, on the pastry, it makes the pastry go soggy and it's not a good result. Okay, we've done that.
And the other thing to notice as well, so again, this pie has a base and a top. So I think sometimes in Britain when people talk about a pie, it just has the top, but this is the full casing.
This will give you Australian citizenship, I think. Now get some. You can use a beaten egg or you can use milk. It doesn't matter. It has pretty much the same result. Get a bit of milk and a brush and just brush the edges of the pastry around the edges like that. So you can see I put some milk and made it a bit damp around the edges. Then you get the other piece of pastry and put it on the top, press it down around the edges. And this is the great, I love doing this bit. If I can find the fork.
Let me get the fork.
Here we are, I've got it. So you get your fork and go like this around the edges. You see what I'm doing? Whoop, there we are. And what that's doing is sealing the pie. It's also making it look quite pretty. Then the second bit that I really like is you get the knife and working away from you, you cut the edges of the extra pastry that we've got by just going down in a downward motion away from you.
Yeah, make sure it's away from you. You don't want to be cutting yourself.
You don't want to stab yourself. So just keep cutting it like that. See what I'm doing, cutting like that? And you'll end up with a fantastic looking pie. We're going to put a few little fork marks in there, or as Sylvana said earlier, you can cut out a little bit of pastry and stick it on the top. And this is the vent to let the steam come out.
So if you remember in terms of, so if you could see on one of these tiles, those vents that are coming out of the pie on our book cover, we've got steam and dollars and pounds.
Then you put a bit more of the beaten egg or the milk on the top of that to get it ready for the oven. Your oven should be about 180 degrees. It'll take about 45 minutes to cook this, so keep an eye on it. What's important though is that it's the colour, if it looks right. Of course, the filling is already cooked. All you're really doing now is cooking the pastry. But it takes about 45 minutes to do it. So, into the oven. And look, magically, we have a pie. Which came out of the
oven. Where do you get your oven from, Paul?
Yes, exactly. And I've got asbestos hands, obviously. But we have a pie which was, it's just truly magnificent. I think you'd agree. And because we buttered the tin, it's easy to come out. Look at that.
That is beautiful.
And then we have the pie. And this pie is preferably drunk with a glass of red wine. But it's a when you take it out, when you take it out of the oven, give it maybe 2 or 3 minutes just to rest for a sec. And then when you tip it up, you may need to tap it with a spoon or something just to loosen it so it can come out. But it is hot, so be careful. You know, you want to wear some sort of glove or something, or a tea towel or whatever to get it out, and just let it sit there. And it's okay there for a good 5 minutes before you eat. Otherwise, it's just too hot to eat.
Yeah. And Phoebe has a question.
I'm sorry?
Okay.
Do you have it with any other food like gravy?
Yeah, you can. A very famous Australian dish is what's called a pie floater, which is on a plate. There's a pie, mashed potatoes, green peas, and gravy. And they are magnificent.
Depends
But-
on your taste.
Yeah, depending on your taste. You can have it with a salad and pretend that you're being healthy. You can have it with a salad. It's always good to have it with what in Australia we would call tomato sauce. Here it's called ketchup. It's brilliant with ketchup. Absolutely fantastic.
Could you tell us what were your best-selling pies?
Oh, this one. This is the number.
Okay.
Yeah, but we did the top 3 or 4 that we had were the Aussie Beef Pie, the chicken and avocado was a big one. We figured out how to get, because avocado will go dark with when it hits oxygen, but if you put the top on real quick, there's no oxygen, and then we'd freeze them, and it worked. So it was a really successful pie. We had chicken and mango, that was great. And we had a vegetarian pie. We had several of them actually, but the one that was really popular was basically ratatouille, but we put chili in it. Because as I said before, you need to put a bit more stronger taste because of the pastry. So we put harissa in the ratatouille. Fantastic. Absolutely brilliant.
And you had the lamb shiraz one?
Lamb shiraz. And the one that was, well, it wasn't successful because it actually cost us more money to make it than we could sell it for, was hot smoked salmon and vodka.
Oh, wow. That sounds incredible.
It was great, but it was a...
Have you still got the
It cost us
recipe?
about £8 to make the pie, and we could sell it for £4.
I imagine. Oh, I want to see that recipe.
We didn't make too many of them, but...
Well, and the other thing that was really interesting, so Paul and I met at Bankers Trust, so many, many years ago. And then when we re-met here in London, I became the founding chair of a group called Advance for Australian Professionals Abroad. And Paul had been the mentor over in the US. So he came over here and he was mentor for us here. So we would have big events at the Australia House or whatever, and you'd have those little party pies.
Little party pies, little mini ones this size.
So it's all about networking and who you can help and who you can lean on and who can give you some ideas and who can challenge you and who can support you.
It's all true. And pies. It's all about pies.
It's all about pies.
Yes.
Well, guys, thank you so much. I've just seen the time is 6:30 and I know we need to wrap up. I've just got to say as well that Danuta, Alberto and Angie have all won books as well, and we are going to have a book in our library, the Gen Den, which is opening on the 19th of April, so everyone can come and grab a copy.
Oh, great.
Yes, but guys, it's been so fascinating, so many insights and really kind of great top tips based on your experience and just your thoughts, kind of looking back at your successes and your failures. Thank you for being so honest and transparent as well. And that pie, I'm about to make one. Thank you so much, guys. And
do send us, LJ, and ask the winners of the books to take some selfies when they get them. I'm putting a collage together.
Oh, brilliant.
among our readers is there's the usual suspects, which are the budding entrepreneurs or the execs that are shifting from the corporate world to their own business. But we're finding that there's execs staying within firms, so like entrepreneurs, as Paul mentioned earlier. There are parents that are talking to their kids about the retail business, about the high street, why businesses are going out, values, sustainability. We're finding there's some kids in a US investment club. They've got it down as their preferred reading. So, there's the usual suspects reading it, but then we're really delighted and heartened to see how many other people are reading it as well.
Oh, brilliant. And Navad, we've got one spare one from the competition as well. So we'll send you a copy as well. I know Emma's got one already, but we will send one over. So will you just email us your address, Navad, and we'll get that over to you?
Yes, sure.
Fantastic.
Oh, that's great. Thank you all. And thank you, LSE. Thank you, LJ.
Thank you. Take care.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
See you.